Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us once again to have our time together. Today, I am joined by two really amazing men, and I'll just introduce you. Here is a singer, songwriter, actor, playwright, dancer, educator, principal of Loyola Village Fine and Performing Arts Magnet School, Dr. Julio Hanson.
Wow, y'all can remember
Ay,
you
ay,
got all
ay.
you got
What?
everything. You
Everything.
got every single thing, one of my bullets.
Come on. I've been following you. I've been following
stalking me.
you.
Stalking me.
Yes, man. And to my right, Kenyon 8. I have a lot to say about this man. He makes this possible. He makes this podcast possible. He's behind the scenes today here next to me. Uh, Kenyon is an expert in digital media, marketing. He's done consulting work. He too is an educator. And so you notice the common thread here, education. So I am so thrilled to be in the presence of two Black men in the world of education. And that'll be the focus of our conversation. But who knows where things will go, right?
That's right.
Let's jump
Hallelujah.
in. Let's jump in. Let's
Get
jump
on
in.
in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, what's going on in our time? What's going on?
A lot's going on. The world's going on, and we are just trying to keep up with it.
Yes.
Well, I'm really just excited for this year. This is a year of really immersing myself and in my art, and truly putting my art out there so people can see it. I do a lot of writing in isolation. I do a lot of writing in seclusion. And I, despite the fact that I do a lot of stuff on stage and do a lot of things in the studio recording wise, I do a lot of stuff in seclusion and isolation. So I'm really, really ready to send some of that stuff out into the world that I've been doing in isolation, like the plays and the musicals, working on a musical. I think the last time we talked, I was working on the musical, and I realized it takes years to work on musicals. I was just in New York, and I was meeting some people that worked on Hell's Kitchen, worked on Suffs, worked on what's the one? Michael R. Jackson, Strange Loop. And they all said that it took them 13, 14, 15, 16 years to write their musicals. Did you think that people to get, they just write a musical in like 3 years? Like I did. I wrote this musical in like 3 years. I'm like, okay, it's going to be ready. And it's not ready. And now it's been like 4 years. So, it's been more than 4 years actually. But 4 years of dedicated writing on it.
Yeah.
And so I just realized, it's about the journey. I'm just writing it and keep going. The process and, putting all the songs together. And then I go back and I change the whole thing. And then I go back and I make it, I break the fourth wall in one draft. And then I go back and I don't break the fourth wall. And fourth wall is like when you talk to the audience, right?
Yes, yes.
Well, one of the characters talks to the audience. And I said, well, no, maybe I should just go right to the plot. So I take that away, and then now I'm gonna put it back in. So it's been good though. Working with the kids at the school as a principal, just been fun. I love the kids. The kids are amazing. The kids are amazing. They just do so, they do so much. They've been so loving to me lately. I don't know why. The kids just run up to me and hugging me every day. Like I get at least 20 hugs a day. At least.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And you can't beat that.
You can't.
So that's been fun. It's not, the job itself is not as fun. It's not as fun being a principal as I hoped it would be. I never thought it would be fun, but I just thought it wouldn't be so miserable.
Wow.
But it's a lot, it's a lot that we have to deal with.
It's a challenge in ways that you don't welcome.
Yeah, it's just a challenge in ways that I don't need in my life. I don't need the challenge of pressure or the challenge of data or the challenge. I mean, it's all that stuff is good, but it's just not. It's not making me healthy. It's making me unhealthy. just to focus on that data, focus on
Yeah.
how many points, how many percentages, how many, how many kids did not, how many, it's just like, so it's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you feel supported in your role?
I'm supported, but the ones who are supporting me are being pressured. So it's just like, it's just a domino effect.
Yeah.
So it's like, even though you're supported, they say they're supporting you, and I feel they're supported, but they still have to get their agenda done.
Right.
So it's like, and I get it. I love data. I love knowing what we're doing and if we're doing if it really works.
Right.
I love that part, but it's manic.
And it's important to have that information, but not to the exclusion of your creative juices, because that's what you're there for.
There's no room for creative juices. There's no room to be creative. I mean, I am a creative.
In an art school.
I am in a fine and performing arts school, and I'm the least, I told somebody, while I was in New York, I was a principal. He said, "Whoa, you don't have no time to be creative." I said, "What do you mean?"
Wow.
He says, "Because you're using all your creative juices to solve problems at the school." I'm like, dang, okay.
Wow.
So I'm like, it's just a message for me that I need to make sure that I do what I do. I do my music, I do my writing, I do my dancing, and I do my acting, which it's hard to juggle all that at the same time.
So it's important that you're listening to what's happening inside of you and what your environment is telling you, so that you can course correct, so that you can do your Julio-ness to the hilt.
Oh, God, yeah. They need to see.
Right?
Yeah.
On that note, I want to hear about Kenyon-ness.
Yes. Kenyon-ness. I like that.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's an interesting time in the Kenyon world. But really exciting, just really being able to settle in with this space, right? And so my partners and I were fortunate enough to acquire this business fourth quarter of last year. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do that was because I understood that this place could become a incubator for content creators, specifically Black content creators. I mean, obviously we're open to servicing any and everyone, and we do, but it was really important for me that this business be a safe space for true content creators. And I knew that then we would have a responsibility to do what we could to amplify their voices, right? So it's not just about them being able to come here to, do their podcast, express their creativity, but then also be working on the other hand to connect them and to position them with entities that will allow their voices to get spread out. Because what I can tell you in the podcast world, there are a lot of people, right, that will do a podcast, have an idea for a podcast, but then they very quickly get discouraged because they're like, well, if a tree falls in the forest, did it really make a sound, right? Like it's a very saturated space. And so, not only as a businessman would it be advantageous for me to sort of think about how to solve that problem, but just also in support of the creatives that pass through this place. But then the other component, which I think is why we're all here, is I have a relationship with Los Angeles Unified School District, where through their BSAP initiative, where I, was teaching business leadership and entrepreneurship courses at high schools. And so when the opportunity came up to acquire this business, I was like, well, why not create a curriculum that will teach both middle and high school students everything that they need to know about digital media, new media, podcasting in a professional studio environment. And so that's going really well, and so well, in fact, to where now we are actively developing a nonprofit arm to this business. So if we look at it from a business standpoint, we're adding more revenue channels, which is obviously really good.
Right.
But then also we are really curating the brand narrative of the network studios, which is that we're also an anchor in the community. So we're a safe place for creatives, but then also an anchor for the community, because we are providing young people with the knowledge of the tools that are both relevant to them and that are readily available to them, so that they can responsibly create content and allow their voices to be heard even at a young age. So often young people, they're presented with opportunities, or they're told about opportunities that they have to wait until the sweet by and by in order to take advantage of. But in this technologically driven world, a lot of opportunity is available to them right now. So it's incumbent upon individuals like us to be able to make those resources available to them, but then show them how to responsibly, create content or express themselves. So those are all the things that are going on in my world. So it's about growing this core business, but then also adding these different channels to the business so that, we can maximize the potential of what is the network studios.
And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about how it is so timely that you're engaged in this mission, because the more we reflect on the power of recognizing the resources that we are and how to engage with resources around us, then we are really setting the tone for ourselves and our communities to feel empowered at a time when we are noticing all the social justice movements taking place because the oppressor is agitated by our greater awareness. And so the work that both of you do is essential to the time we're living in right now. Right
That's
now.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, it's definitely, we are at war. We are at war. And so many, I still feel, I kind of wish I could take off my principal hat and say what really is on my mind. But I know that people are listening. People are watching.
I went
know.
and told what school it was.
I know. So I can't even pretend like I'm just some random principal. So I can't really say.
Oh
But
my
we are
goodness.
at war, and I think but I will say this. I think
You answered my support question very well.
Right. You saw that, right?
The art of diplomacy.
But you know what? It's funny because that was probably the most the easiest one to answer, because I do feel supported. It's just that it's hard.
Yeah.
Because we're at war for certain things that I feel we're not really paying attention to. Like these kids, are they really, really learning how to be human beings? We don't have we don't have time to teach them humanity.
Yeah.
That's the problem. We're teaching them skills, but we're not teaching them humanity. There's a lady named Dr. Goldie Muhammad. She wrote a book called Cultivating Genius and Unearthing Joy. And it speaks about the joy of Black people and how that was what sustained us through many years back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 1920s, 30s, 40s rather. Not the I got to say 1920s, 30s, 40s.
I know, back in the 1900s.
We're already in the 20s right now.
I know.
In 1900, but that sustained Black people, the joy, right? Literary society sustained Black people. So we need to get back to some of that. But it wasn't so much just about the skill, but it was about the community.
Community.
And so right now we're teaching skill, but there's no room for humanity. How are we sending our kids out there to the world to be the next leaders of this world? We're sending them out there to know how to take tests. We're sending them out there to know how to do math problems or whatever. But how are they going out there knowing what to do when somebody's going to commit suicide? When somebody's when somebody hates the color of your skin, or when somebody feels so depressed that they just want to shoot a gun.
Right.
How are we training our kids for that? There's no time.
And the reason why that's an issue and how that's different now than it was in years past is that the world that they live in, the things that they are exposed to, the community that they do know that they find most likely on social media is giving them information and exposing them and is exposing them to elements that are unsavory, that are unhealthy.
Exactly.
So where is that, to the point that you're making, where is that element to counteract that, right? So, I feel like, America, there's a lot of sins, right? And I'm not anti-American by any stretch of the imagination, but I also recognize that there are a lot of anti-Black policies that have been in place, right?
Absolutely.
But one of the greatest sins, I think, of America, and it's really affected all of us, is the fact that we've not adapted our systems to the times how the world has sort of evolved. So in other words, right, and we kind of talked about this before, and it was more in the political sense, but if you just use the Constitution as an example, right, and I'm sure we've all heard this argument that like this was a document that was created hundreds and hundreds of years ago and has not been modified in any real meaningful way in at least 60, 70 years, but yet think about how much has changed in the world in the last 60 to 70 years. And so even when we look at something like education, where it's like, okay, 60, 70 years ago, 100 years ago, it was okay just to focus on skills because the world was also moving at a pace where that was acceptable. But now the world is at such a place because of technology where there has to be a greater emphasis on humanity with our young people. There has to be a greater emphasis on community because that's what they're being faced with right now. And without any tools, being given any tools and how to navigate and understand what is not necessarily right or wrong, but what is going to promote growth and advancement and continued development, then I think that represents a systemic threat to us all, right?
Absolutely. And it adds to the systemic oppression that's been ongoing for generations. So if we are to liberate ourselves from what we've internalized from the values of the oppressor, and stop moving in the world simply in a survivalist way, we need to not just put our energies into like you said, these skill development areas of our lives, but the humanity, what are areas of my life and my current generation that need healing because these issues went unattended. I mean, well, let me rephrase that. Not unattended because we do maladaptive things to cope with them. So that's a way of attending to them. But to do it in a way that really promotes understanding and healing. And that's where education comes in for our liberation. And so it is tragic, I will say, that, to be working in an art school, where all the elements are present, to really go deeply into humanness, you're feeling so restricted.
Well, it's a matter of I mean, I don't like saying that, teaching is, I won't say teaching is easy because it's not easy. Teaching is hard.
Amen to
but we
that.
have to reinvent how we teach.
Agreed.
Like when I started back in, in the 19 something, right?
Yeah,
I was 21.
Right.
And when I started back then teaching, it was like, you could teach and you had time to do a little bit of stuff here and there, a little bit of arts, a little bit of music, a little bit of dance.
Yeah.
But now we have to reinvent how we teach. We have to teach with everything has to mesh together. Nothing is separate anymore. You can't teach science without acknowledging math, without acknowledging music, without acknowledging art, without acknowledging dance.
Yeah.
They all have to match.
Interconnectedness.
And the dance goes back to science. Biology or whatever it is.
Yes.
However the connection is you make it, it all matches. So teachers are having a hard time thematically putting all that stuff together. They call it thematic teaching, right?
Yeah.
They have a hard time teaching all of that and making sure our students still get what they need.
Especially when there are so many restrictions to what they can present and how they can present it, especially as we're talking about, racist policies such as banning of books, which really engage teachers and parents too. I mean, families in developing a sense of creativity and how to present material that goes beyond what those banned books present. Just recently, I was here having a conversation with a professor that I love. She's like a mentor, and a lot of her work has revolved around supporting teachers in bilingual teaching. And we had a conversation precisely about this, the banning of books, and how do we creatively respond to that? Well, all these regulations really put their thumb on teachers. They don't get to express their creativity, especially now when it's most needed.
Mm-hmm.
And they're burning out.
Mm-hmm.
And they're burning out. So they don't have the space unless they figure out a way to address what you just said, the interconnectedness between all of these themes, that math is connected to the arts in some way.
Mm-hmm.
That science, there's art in there.
See, but what you said is true, though. It is restriction, and it's not necessarily because of the teachers, because of the district. It's because this world is so fragile that people are suing. And they're getting upset. Like if you present something in a way that a parent doesn't like, they're going against the district and suing the district.
Litigious.
So we can't. Yeah, we're in such a litigious society. We cannot present about cultural things like Dia de los Muertos, right? Because that goes against somebody's beliefs. We cannot present about LGBTQ plus, because that goes against somebody's belief. Although we have all of these people in our community. We can't present on it because one person will come and say, I don't believe in that, and I think that it should not be part of the curriculum, and then we have to stop it. So that's why teachers are forced with the fact, like, we can't really do what we want to do, and some of the teachers have the knowledge to do it, and some of them do not have the knowledge to present it right. Some of them, say, well, I'm not going to present on that because it's not. It was an equitable part of history. And I'm like, no, you can still present on it. You can talk about the missions of California,
right?
Where these people, this tragedy of our country, of our state, right?
Right.
It's so tragic when you think about the missions that we visit and we just adore these beautiful churches. But that's such a tragic history.
They are symbols of oppression.
Symbols of oppression and death and dominance. And what do you call it when you get rid of a race?
Genocide.
Thank you.
Genocide.
Yeah, get rid of a genocide.
Yeah,
erasure. Yes.
But we can talk about it as a part of history, but we can also say that that's not where we were, and now this is where we're going. So
context.
How much of that do you think? And I want to pose this as a question because I'm not a parent. But how much of that do you think is just because parents today in this time are looking for any excuse not to do their role or do their job as parents? Because I know when I was raised, right, it was, you go out into the world and there are things that you're going to be exposed to, but the principles and the values and the morals that are instilled in you are instilled in the home. And they were instilled in such a way to where my parent didn't have to worry about that being compromised as I went out into the world. I mean, we can take something as simple as drugs. Like, hey, don't do drugs. Here are the reasons why, whatever. So yes, I know that you may be in environments and in spaces and have friends or associates that do that, but I'm not worried about you doing that or even being influenced by that because of the principles that are put at home. Whereas now it sounds like it's more of, well, because you taught my child this and I don't agree with this, whatever it is, I don't agree with it. Now I want to attack you instead of, okay, well, I'm not worried about what it is that is being taught at the school because when you're home, I'm sharing those principles and making sure that those values, whatever values they are being instilled in the home. I wonder, based on your experiences, how much do you feel like that plays a part now with parents of today?
I'm so forgiving of parents. I'm so forgiving. I mean, parents could be the worst parents in the world. I still feel like we have the responsibility to raise their children. And, because people always say, well, they're not coming to school, or they're coming to school late. The parents, they're just not involved. I'm like, okay, so what? It's our job to really build our children because that's what we signed up for. So I'm the sucker of the group, right? When I say, I'm forgiving of parents.
Yeah.
However, being a parent, I do know that you do have to do your job.
Exactly.
You do have to raise your kids because if you don't raise your kids, as you mentioned already, Kenyon, that we're in a society where social media is raising the kids, right?
Exactly.
So they're giving the kids all this information is downloading to these kids at milliseconds and milliseconds and milliseconds, millions of information. And if you don't keep with your kid,
somebody else is raising
somebody
them.
else.
Something else is before we know it, AI is going to be raising these kids.
I
Straight
know.
up.
And social media addiction is on the rise. Because living in front of the screen is so much more common. When you see children at an early age, that's where they live, in front of a screen. But then on your comment about being forgiving of parents, I want to piggyback on that, because there's so many things that parents face today that our parents did not.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's
You
why I'm
know?
so forgiving. Yeah.
That our
'Cause it's so
parents
hard.
that
It's
our
hard to be a
parents
parent
did
now.
not. Exactly. And so that's not to unhook them from responsibility, because they do have it. They just face challenges that are layered in new ways as it relates to, meeting the needs of their children, meeting the needs of the couple, if it's a couple, meeting the needs of that single parent, if it's a single parent. And so teachers more and more talk about, not just collaborating with parents, collaborating with other family members that in some kind of way are responsible for the wellness of the child. And so it's not an either or answer. And yes, to your point, I think it's so important to remember that what happens at home has a lot of weight, and we need to focus on that too. But there are so many angles to this story.
Yeah.
I can see why you're forgiving
Yeah, I mean, and
of
then
the
parents are being
parents.
downloaded. We're all being downloaded information on social media. That at least we have the ability to a lot. I mean, most of us. I'm hoping the three of us right here have the ability to kind of flesh out what we don't need,
Right.
keep what we don't, but it still affects us, right?
does.
We walk out of here, we think, am I good enough?
Yeah.
Am I doing enough?
Yeah.
Who's watching me, or who's looking at who cares about what I do?
Right.
That's what I go through every day. Here, this ripe age of mine, I'm still thinking, am I doing enough?
You always make yourself sound like you're ancient.
Well, you know what? We are two generations from. I mean, you talked about generations. It's like our generation. We're like two generations from who's going to be running the world in the next 5 years. The
The
kids
alpha
are 11,
generation.
and they're going to be 18 or pretty soon in
And
7
no time
years,
flat.
and they'll be starting to run the world.
And
So
what are they being fed?
yeah.
And how do we make ourselves responsible, for how we engage with children, because it's urgent.
Yeah.
It's urgent. So it's interesting because here we are at this crossroads. You're talking about the alpha generation, and then the people in the generation before us influence who we've become. So what is it that we need to pause and reflect on to present ourselves in a more healed way to the alpha generation? Because like you said, in 5 minutes they're going to be leading the world. So
That's
what do we let me first go to this angle. What do we as Black people in this African diaspora, what do we have to do right here and now to address that question of, what we teach, what we pass on to the next generation?
We got to start listening. I think whether we talk intergenerationally, whether we talk within our collective as, Black Americans, the diaspora. It's funny, I've been to a few different countries, Afro that are part of the diaspora, and in every country that I've been to, the feedback is always the same. We're waiting on you guys, talking about Black Americans. When you guys figure it out, when you guys go, we're going right behind you. And so when I hear that question, that's always where I start. I start with Black Americans and being like, well, we got to start listening to each other. And we cannot be afraid to speak truth to power. And I think one of the downsides to being in this social media influence space is that herd mentality is a real thing.
It really
And
is.
so people are afraid to stand out, right? It's
mhm.
easier to blend. It's easier to go with the trend.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, if you take the position of truth, of speaking, right, defining right from wrong, and I'm not even necessarily talking about in a moral sense, but just like in terms of what we know, their values that we know that are core, that are central to
Mhm.
us being able to continue to exist as humans within this space of humanity. And if we continue to neglect that for our own desires, right, and our own agenda,
Mhm.
right, which then keeps us from listening to each other, then we're not going to be able to advance. And then consequently, then the rest of the diaspora just is left to fend for themselves. So I think that it starts with listening to each other, and it starts with not being afraid to embrace truth, right? So even in the example that you gave, where it's like there's certain things that are not being taught anymore because books are being banned, like, in my opinion, I feel like the root of that is because people are afraid of the truth. They would rather esteem the missions that are in this state and be like, oh, this is such a beautiful thing. This is a part of California. But yeah, let's really examine that history.
Right.
Let's see why these things are there. But it's now become, and it's not a new thing, right? Because I've taken those field trips as a student to those different missions, and no one ever talks about how these things got here and what the story is behind it and how people have died. How all they just look at the beautiful architecture. It's been here for years. This is the story behind it.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's almost like the chickens have come home to roost from that standpoint of we've ignored the truth or suppressed the truth for so long. And yet I feel like that's the thing that I would say the generations that we are a part of, as well as the generations that are coming after us, that's the thing they want the most. They do want the truth, right? And so now I feel like we're in this space where people are competing for, well, I'm the arbiter of truth, or there is no arbiter of truth, or it's your own truth, when that's not really, we know that that's not the case. So I think that there have to be more voices that speak up for what is right, speak up for what it is. Don't worry about trying to blend, and understand that, and trust, not understand, but trust that when you give people the truth, right? This is why you get 20 hugs a day from those kids. Because when they look at you and when they see you, they know this is somebody who cares about me. They may not be able to articulate it, although some of them can, even at a young age, but they resonate with
They
that.
can feel it.
The things that have always been will always be, right? Like people say, pets and babies, they pick up on energy even if they don't know what it is. And so I think just letting our light shine in that regard and really speaking towards truth, I think that's the beginning, and it requires listening to each other. Absolutely.
Are you a preacher's kid?
No.
This boy is preaching.
I know.
Not at all.
I know.
He got that flow. I'm like, yes, I'm going to your church.
So I'm telling you.
No, that's funny.
But it's true. It's true. Being willing to listen and wanting to embrace the truth.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your thoughts, especially because you and I had some detailed conversations about exactly that during the pandemic, in the throes of the pandemic. Because truth was definitely causing a lot of people worldwide to throb, particularly because prior to the pandemic, busyness prevented them or supported them in avoiding truths inside of themselves and around them. So, what are your thoughts on the role of educators in promoting listening and embracing truth?
Oh, that's a heavy question.
Yes.
I can't really.
Swim in it.
Well, we talked about educators having their hands tied, right? So
Yeah.
there's only so much truth we can tell without having somebody pull your coattail. There's only so much
Right.
truth that you can live or live in without somebody saying, "Well, you can't do that," But I do feel that we as educators have to present the information,
Yeah.
and we cannot hold back information.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't, as an educator, you cannot give your opinion to a point where you're trying to sway some students or sway a community in one way. You have to give them the information.
Yeah.
And then give them the tools to understand the information. Because a lot of teachers just want to give them the information, but do they understand it?
So you want to promote critical thinking.
Well, yeah.
You want to promote critical
criticality
thinking.
is definitely...
Which is the opposite of what systemic oppression has done in the context of academia, which is indoctrination. What you're trying to do is promote critical thinking.
Yeah. And
here's the information. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
How are you going to let curiosity move you?
Right. And it's more than just they say it's a 21st century skill. It's just a life skill.
Yeah.
Communication, criticality, all that, consciousness is all a life skill that these kids need. And so when we're presenting them with these truths that we're speaking about, how are they going to absorb it and what are they going to do with it? Like you have kids right now who are not able to deal with their own inequality or their own inability to keep up.
Yeah.
So they're feeling less.
Yeah.
So what are we doing to make sure our kids understand that you don't have to be them, you don't have to be that, you don't have to be this, you can just be who you are, right? And I think you asked about the role of educators is that we have to fight for the students that we serve, knowing that, and our hands are how can I say this? I mean, it's like
I see you squirming.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's like
trying to choose the words carefully.
Yeah, I'm choosing because.
But I mean, that's how our energy is drained. When we don't feel like we have the freedom to flow in the thing that makes us feel purposeful.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, and somebody's right now listening, saying, "Spit it out.
Say it.
Just say it.
Just say it."
No, I mean, we have a role, we have a purpose, and that is for our kids.
Yeah,
our kids are what we come for, what we go for every single day. I don't care. It's like people want to say, "Oh, do this," or I feel this. No, do it for them. If it lifts them up, then do it.
Would you say?
Go ahead.
Would you say? Well, questions for you too. Would you say that this, what you just both talked about, is a form of resistance?
This being
encouraging listening, encouraging truth telling, telling the truth.
I mean, I don't see it as a form of resistance. I mean, I guess resistance to what is seeming to be the norm, perhaps, but I don't see it as resistance. I mean, I see it as humanity. Like it's just it's what should be part and parcel of the human experience, and I feel like we're moving further away from that. Right, in terms of this idea of humanity. So no, I don't see it as resistance.
What you said earlier, you said about listening though, and you asked about is listening a form of resistance. We've been listening. I think what you're saying is we're not listening to each other.
Correct.
And even if the kids today are listening, they're listening to the other things. They're not listening to each other, and they're not listening to the right things.
What I meant by resistance was in response to what you said about going ahead as an educator and telling those truths, even if otherwise you've been prevented from doing it. Where systems are trying to prevent you from doing it.
That I would call resistance, but therein lies that challenge, which, okay, same thing, right? How often are you having to remind your teachers that it's about the kids?
Right.
Every time we meet. Every time we meet, I say we're here about the kids, because I don't feel like I feel that like the fight is sometimes not about the kids. The fight is about what I want, what I need, what makes me feel good, right? And so I think I have a good group of teachers in my school right now that understand that for the most part. But in the years past, people are so bent on trying to be right and trying to just do their own thing. And I've done this for years and I will not do that. And, I don't believe in that. And that's not my opinion. And I'm not going to, why are we doing this? I mean, I've had teachers tell me in the past, why do we have to study about Black people? Why do we have to read a book about Black people? And I have to tell this teacher, we have to read a book about Black people and study Black community because most of the kids in our school are Black.
Are Black.
Oh.
64% of our kids are Black. So if we're not studying about it, what are we doing?
Right.
Who are you studying? Who are you teaching them about if you don't know about it?
Exactly.
Well, no, but see, you make us feel like we can't teach Black kids. Well, you can't unless you study where they came from, and let's study what made us strong as a community, what made us strong as a people, and then you can start teaching. And I never told the teachers that. I never said, no, you can't, because I got to be political. I got to be diplomatic. No, well, you see, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, we need to learn about, cultures and make sure No, I should have said, well, you can't. What basis are you teaching them from?
Tell it like it is.
Where you coming from?
Yeah.
Right.
If you're not Black, that's not that Black people can teach Black kids better than other people, but if you're not Black, you already have a check against you, right?
Right.
So if you're not Black, be open to learning about the kids you teach.
Right.
Today,
So-
I mean, Julio, it's like you were there with me. I had class today.
I was there, yeah, I was there. I was kidding.
And, we were talking about cultural humility and how it's all about staying open because learning is endless. That if you're not done learning about yourself, how are you going to presume to know everything there is to be known about a particular community that you're serving? To stay open, to let the not knowing be an exciting prospect, And so for this teacher to say to you, well, I don't need to discuss this with students. To say it's short-sighted is an understatement. It really does not say we're here to learn. We're here to learn. It adds to the division within our own communities that gets in the way of the listening and in the way of the truth-telling. So how do we unite our community?
Yeah, I don't know. I appreciate the work you're doing. Like you're Kenyon is doing some work that is not only building his company, your organization, but you're reaching out as a nonprofit. That's one thing that I would like to do in the future is to be part of a nonprofit that means something, that does something, that builds on something.
Building community.
Because we have to, W.B. Du Bois was talking about the talented 10th, right? He said, we got to focus on the top 10%, because if we don't focus on the top 10%, then we're not helping anybody. And then Booker T. Washington was on the other side talking about, no, we need to help everybody, And I see both of these men having this argument, and I understand both of them. But I do understand that those of us that have been exposed to the truth, that have understood what needs to be done, we do need to, at some point, build and bring in one. And build and bring in another. And just keep building until we build, build that strong network. And because I had a discussion with somebody else, an administrator, who she was telling me, you just need to go in there and just blast them with everybody and tell them they need to do this and tell them this and that. And I said, no. I'm going to get my little group. I'm going to strengthen my little army. Because if I try and blast everybody, it's going to be like, oh, he's just some crazy nut. So I started small. So now I got my team together. My team is my ride or die, and they know what needs to be done.
Right.
And so now we can start pulling in other ones.
Yeah, gradually.
So yeah.
You go where you go where the receptivity is.
Strategy.
Yeah.
Strategy. I think when talking about community and building community, especially building community to the point of affecting change, I think strategy is a key component that is missing. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I also feel like the answers, honestly, are the same as they've always been, right? You talked about humility, talked about listening. You've talked about communication, humanity. Like, those things are still the solutions. There's so much noise and so much conjecture and so much opinion and so much ego, right? That those very simplistic foundational values get lost. And then we get to a place where it's like, well, what are we supposed to do? What is it? And it's like, well, let's just go back to the basics. It's the same as what it's always been.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that we also have to, that we can't lose sight of, right, is sort of this intergenerational connection. Civilization has only been able to advance because of the wisdom that the younger generation got from their forefathers. Technology has now made it so that if those forefathers, if our elders are not technologically savvy, then there is no longer a connection with the coming generation. And I think that's the thing that we've got to pay attention to and solve, because the only way that we're going to continue to progress, right, is through that wisdom of lived experience.
Right.
What we have now is we have a generation and generations that are coming that feel like they have the answers, that feel like they don't need to listen, that if you're not communicating the way that I'm used to communicating, then we've got nothing to talk about. And that's what we've got to solve. But again, solving that is in these foundational principles that we're discussing right now. But I think that's the new challenge, is that there is a technological divide where if you're not in those spaces and in those places, you're going to, the wisdom that the generations that are coming after us are going to need in order to continue to build and iterate will be missed. And then what?
And then what? And well, so that really explains deeply why you're doing what you're doing with youth.
That is correct.
To provide them with the exposure to technology and how to use it in a way that's productive, that can build their communities. Just like you do it when you engage with these kids that are giving you the 20 hugs. They feel what your purpose is.
Yeah.
They do. I want to see if we can create a segue here into a topic that I know is near and dear to you. It is definitely near and dear to me, and that is artivism. How the arts support the forward movement of communities, of individuals. You've spoken to it. I would love for us to get into the Julio-ness version of that.
I wish I could drop names right now, because there's so many people out there doing some great work that I know that, I mean, and I don't want to start dropping names because I'll forget some people, because there's so many people out there doing some stuff that I'm just like, wow, how are y'all doing all this stuff and being so prolific about it? Because I just attended a seminar, I guess you could say, online with Latinx. It's Latinx Commons Theater. I hope I have the right name. And they put this together. My only dramaturg, Daphne C. Cray, she's my dramaturg for Negra, my play, my musical. And she
a beautiful play.
Yeah, she pulls me into a lot of stuff that's like really thought-provoking processes and artivist type things. And so she told me about this seminar yesterday, and I watched people present their new works. It was like 8 different writers. And people are just presenting on different things through theater, through the arts, through music. Like you have one play about immigrants. You have one play about a girl who is the 5th generation in her family, and she wants to have a child because all of her 4th generation women before her who are still alive have had children when they were 14 or 15, 16. So they're all alive, right? So she's the last one. She's like, I want to have a child. And they're like, no. They're trying to stop that cycle. But she sees it as something like,
She sees it as something that's beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. She wants to keep going with it, right? And so just stuff like that makes you stop and think, wow, okay, these people are writing some crazy stuff, crazy good stuff. I can't wait to just be at a point where I can put whatever on stage that I really feel and not have to worry about who sees it.
Right.
Right now I kind of have to think, oh, what if I do something on stage? It's kind of, because I'm in a situation that I do have to uphold a certain, it is what it is, a certain level of, prestige, a posture. But I do want to talk about some deeper issues. I do want to talk about some deeper things. I'm writing also a play about a dysfunctional family where the father steps aside and has a son outside of wedlock, and he never really accepts the son, and the son has gone through PTSD because of it. sleeping with his mother, the mistress or the mother, in a car till he was 8 years old. Dealing with that in the black family, right?
Yeah.
And that it's an issue that goes with every family. It could be a
Right.
white family, it could be a Latino family,
True.
Asian family, whatever,
True.
Native American,
True.
where somebody feels ostracized by the family. And just, I think that artivism is definitely a place where people like me, and I'm sure like Kenyon as well,
Absolutely.
can feel free to fly. I feel free. Like when I'm writing, I just feel free. I feel like I can just, I guess that's why I've been writing in isolation, because I feel free and I can do whatever I want.
Yes.
And so now when I get to that place where I want to say, okay, boom, this is
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I don't care what y'all think.
Yes.
Then
Oh my goodness.
I will be the phoenix rising from the ashes.
And healing is in that sense of freedom to fly, that sense of freedom to be grounded in a clear awareness of who you are, the value that you bring, that you don't have to try to convince anybody of your value. You are so connected to it. That's freedom. That's freedom. Then you get to be in your creative juices flow and
it's not easy though.
Be purposeful.
But it's not easy.
It's not easy because
it
entails going deeply into our history to address things that are embedded even in our DNA.
Yeah,
there's a vulnerability for sure that you have to be willing to embrace and be prepared. Right. But again, in very much in the same way as how you say that you have to remind your teachers that you're doing it for the kids. I feel like artivism, I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it for my community. I'm doing it for so I'm willing to be the sacrificial lamb, to put myself out there through my work to affect change and to hopefully inspire others in my community to share their story, to share their talent, to share their experiences. And so, it's bold, but you definitely have to be willing to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
It's funny you said sacrificial lamb. That's true though.
Yeah.
Because you are sacrificing yourself when you address certain things, issues. Somebody's gonna, when you get to a point where you start to make somebody scared, that person is gonna be of power, gonna come and probably tell you, "What are you doing?
Yeah.
We don't want to do that now. But you have to be willing to say, "Well, I'm gonna do it anyway."
Because we've gotten comfortable with lying. We've gotten comfortable with sort of shielding ourselves from having to deal with those things. So then we get uncomfortable when somebody is willing to step out to be that,
Yeah. And getting comfortable with lying to ourselves, if you will, is part of moving in the world in survival mode. And it takes boldness, it takes courage, it takes community to be in that process of looking into the truth. And I will submit again and again and again, the pandemic really accelerated that process. It really accelerated the process. It was unavoidable. And so here we are, and it is our time to seize this opportunity to create shifts individually and collectively. I have to say, being in the presence of two powerful Black men, I am really proud of both of you. Yes. I'm proud of you and what you stand for, because other people are watching you. Other men are watching you. And that inspires movement. And movement is what's necessary. And I'm also heartened by the two of you, because in this world, it has not been easy to be a Black man. And that's an understatement.
Yeah. That is so true. I think that power and confidence is something that is attractive. And it's contagious. That's why I enjoy being around people that are powerful and confident.
Mhm.
And I try to keep myself away from people that are, you know, not looking to be confident or bring, how can I say, like I'm like an empath in a way. Like
Mhm.
if I'm around somebody who feels like, or they're like, oh my God, my body is so aching, oh,
Mhm.
my bones and my legs,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
start feeling like that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
have to watch who I hang around, because if I hang around those kind of people too much, or if I hang around somebody who is not all together in their head together, I start losing it. I
Mhm.
can literally feel that. And I'm not. This is not to ostracize anybody, but it's
Mhm.
just that I have to I have to take care of my heart and my brain,
Yeah.
because I start to blend with that person and absorb
Mhm.
their energies,
Mhm.
right? So I gotta. So I'm saying all that to say that it is beautiful to be in a space where people are powerful thinking,
Mhm.
and it's not that you have to be that way all the time, but you have to at least know that wherever you are right now is where you are, and then you going there. You have
Mhm.
a destination, right?
Purpose. What you're getting
Purpose.
at is
Yeah,
purpose, being
yeah.
being purpose driven, and I
Yeah.
would say like that's the key, right?
Mhm.
And what I'm realizing is, and I think what would be helpful for others is that your journey is not going to be linear, but the power in having purpose and having a vision and understanding of what it is that you're supposed to be doing
Mhm.
Mhm.
is that even though it's not linear and there may be twists and turns and lefts and rights, when you get to that place that you're supposed to be, you're going to look back and realize that every step that you took, that when you went left, when you went right, they were all things that needed to happen to support where you are in
Yeah,
that
Mhm.
moment,
right.
Mhm.
right? But it's trusting that, right? Because a lot of people, unfortunately, I feel like where, people give up, where they sort of abandon ship is because they're in the middle of the twists, the turns, the lefts, the rights,
Mhm.
and it doesn't make sense. But
Mhm.
it's because they're not anchored by this vision and this
Mhm.
purpose, this sense of purpose and
Mhm.
understanding for their life. So because they're not anchored by that, then they just
Mhm.
think, well, I serve no purpose. They're what, and then they get consumed by that feeling and they end up
Mhm.
adrift, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that's the power of purpose
Mhm.
is, and the necessity of it, and having that vision, and that's what I'm realizing. Like, you couldn't have told me 10 years ago that I would be sitting where I am right now.
Mhm.
I had nothing to do with podcasting or even entertainment or content or any of that stuff. I was on a
Mhm.
completely different journey,
Mhm.
but I'm sitting here right now because of those
Mhm.
seemingly departures that I had. And now I'm able to pull from all of those experiences to thrive in the place where I am right now. And I think
Mhm.
that's important to convey to our community.
Yeah.
Like, you just got to keep living.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Just
Mhm.
keep walking,
Mhm.
but it starts with having sort of that understanding of why you're doing what you're doing.
Right.
What is it that you're supposed to be doing? And an easy place to start is, what inspires you, what motivates
Mhm.
you, what are you
What
Mhm.
passionate
what
about?
Yeah.
inspires
And
you?
sometimes you got to go back, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's not a question. The answer to that question is not something that is accessible at the front of the brain. Sometimes because you've had to deal with so much in life that those are the things that are sitting on top of you. But it's like, push those things back and go back to a point, go back to a place where you were really excited about being alive. What were those elements that were
Mhm.
around you
Mhm.
that gave you that joy, right?
Mhm.
That gave you that energy, that gave you that excitement.
Mhm.
And I guarantee you, therein you will find what that
Yes.
purpose is, what that vision is, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of people, you sort of ask them or talk to them about purpose, and it feels like a very daunting question for them because they're just so filled with what they've been dealing with or what they are dealing with in that moment,
Right.
and so they've got to kind of go back a little bit. But
Mhm.
that finding that is what will then sustain you as you
Mhm.
sort of navigate
Yeah.
life. And then, like I said, when you get to the other side of it, you'll realize, like, oh, I needed to have that moment, or I needed to have
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
experience because that's what's helping me
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
moment that I'm in.
That spark is so full of information, and it can keep that anchor in view.
Yep. Yep.
Regardless of you know
Because
the
that's life.
windiness. Yeah.
Let's
Mhm.
say life be life in. Like, that's a real
Yeah.
thing,
Mhm.
but you
Yeah.
can't allow lifing to knock you so far off that then,
Mhm.
don't feel inspired, and
Right.
and you just, like I said, you end up adrift, and we all know what those things look like, how that
Right.
manifests itself.
Right.
But yeah.
This is why community and building community helps us to um, engage with the present moment and have that anchor in view. Because if we feel isolated, we will go adrift.
Yeah.
And then the purpose will be missed. It won't be realized.
Right.
The two of you are absolutely engaged in it. Thankfully so for me, because I definitely, like you, enjoy being in the presence of people who are letting themselves be moved by purpose. And I especially enjoy having them meet each other. Synergy is possible. Collaboration is necessary. It's our time to really be focused on how we maximize our gifts. It is urgent. It's urgent. It's urgent. Well, on that note, I want to thank you both for sharing your wisdom, and because you serve as inspiration. Thank you so much
for providing the space.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I am privileged to do it.
Yeah.
And
Our time.
thank you for joining us. Hopefully this adds really well to your reflections. If it's the first time that you join us, consider subscribing. We need you to be inspired.